And we're going to continue the 15th chapter of The Key to the Indian by Lynn Reed Banks, which is called Howl of a Wolf. We've heard a couple of wolf howls already as Omri and his father are back in Little Bear's time as very small people, but unfortunately without their clothes and without Omri's father's pocket knife. It was about 5 a.m. New York time when they arrived, and Omri at least has gone to sleep. Neither he nor his dad felt themselves being gently lifted and laid in a safer place. In the morning they woke to find themselves in a vast room, curtained off on 3 sides, and walled with tiles of bark on the 4th. Omri could see what the curtains were now. They were dried corn husks plaited together. Tall Bear, a giant 1-year-old, was gazing at them from above. Little Bear was behind him, restraining him by holding his hands firmly at his sides. Omri stared at Little Bear. He was of course huge, but also very handsome. His head was shaven above his ears, and his plaited hair fell from the crown. He wore earrings, which presumably had always been too small for Omri to see, hanging from holes in his large ears, large enough for Omri to put his fist through. His torso was bare and tattooed with faint curving lines, crossed with several necklaces of leather beads and shells. He was smiling. "You sleep much," he said. "A long journey. Now it is time to greet you." He lifted the baby and stood aside. To Omri and his father's intense embarrassment, they now saw Bright Stars looming above them. She was holding a wooden basin. She sat down on the edge of the bed, and before either of them could realize what she was doing, she took a piece of soft cloth out of the water in the basin, squeezed it, and began to wash Omri's father with it. He was so overcome he couldn't move. He simply stood there with his eyes tightly closed. Omri tried to escape, but Little Bear blocked his flight with a hand as big as a 5-barred gate. He turned against it and watched, abashed, as Bright Stars dried his dad and began to dress him. It was like a ritual. As she did it, she was murmuring soft words in her own language like a chant. She fastened a belt round his waist, then gave him a long piece of doeskin, butter yellow and flexible as satin, indicating that he should draw it between his legs and hang the ends over the belt. Then she helped him step into a pair of leggings. By this time, he had got over his shame and was actively helping, fastening the leggings to the belt himself. The moccasins were circles of soft doeskin, with braided grass to tie them around the ankles. When that was done, the moment Omri had been dreading arrived, Bright Stars turned to him. She had his clothes in her hands. I'll do it myself, Bright Stars," he croaked, but it was no use. He had to go through the ritual wash first and be dried and spoken to, and then he was allowed to dress himself. He was aware of his father standing near him, chuckling under his breath. "It's no use being ashamed," he said quietly. "This is their way with guests, I imagine. We just have to go along with it. It's really not so bad." "Dad?" "No, I mean, we are far too prudish about our bodies." Little Bear, who had gone away for a while, returned. "Wife says not easy to make small clothes. Polite now to say good words to her." They both thanked Bright Stars and said the clothes were beautiful, which they were, but their chests were left bare. "Is there anything for us up top?" asked Omri's dad, touching his chest. "No, Mohawk men wear nothing there." "Even in winter?" Little Bear picked up a large piece of fur-covered hide from the bed and threw it across his shoulder as a cloak. "When winter come, wife make fur clothes," he assured them. They looked at each other. "And we won't be here in the winter," Omri said. "Meanwhile, we've got our sweaters." But when they put them back on, Little Bear let out a roar of laughter. Bright Stars covered her face to hide her giggles. They stared at each other and then, without a word, took them off again. Neither of them could have explained it, but even at the cost of being cold, it didn't look right or feel right to wear non-Indian clothes. "Now we talk," said Little Bear. He stood up, far, far up, till his head was high above them as a cliff top, and, leaving Bright Stars smiling and Tall Bear playing on the earth floor, he swooped on them and picked them up. Omri was made sick and dizzy by the speed with which he was lifted high above the safe earth, and he heard his father gulp and gasp. Little Bear held them, one in each hand in front of his handsome face. "You want food?" "Not just now," Omri's father managed to croak. "Good. Talk first." Little Bear stuck them without ceremony into his belt, wrapped his cloak around him to hide them, and they heard the dry rustle of the corn husks as he brushed past the curtain, moved swiftly beyond the room, and quite shortly out into the open air. And that's the end of chapter 15.